Hi, everyone. This is Reinette Senum, and this is Reinette Senum's foghornexpress.substack.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been doing some personal videos over the last week and a half regarding Ukraine and Europe and NATO and on the ground of what's going on. And today, I'm really excited to actually be speaking with a dear friend of mine, David Avocado Wolfe. I've been watching David for Avocado for many, many years. I have been on his Telegram. He is the meme machine king. And he and I are going to do a deep dive into current events and how we got where we are, and maybe expose some things you may or may not be familiar with. So I just want to say, David Avocado Wolfe, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Reinette. Good to see you, and super excited to be on the show. We're going to have some fun.
We are going to have some fun. And, you know, it's funny. I just asked you before we went live here. I said, now, David Avocado Wolfe, how did you get that name Avocado? So if you don't mind, tell us the story of the name Avocado, and then tell us a little bit more of your background. And then we're going to do a deep dive.
Okay, great. Well, I was originally born on the East Coast. I was actually born in Seaside Heights, New Jersey, which is the location of the Jersey Shore TV show, if anybody's ever seen that or will admit that they've seen that. That's where I'm actually originally from. My dad was a doctor there, and so was my mom. My mom and dad are doctors. My mom was born in Tehran, and we were in with the Shah. So when the Shah got overthrown, we had to flee the country. So my first language was Farsi, not English. Wow. And I was born in the United States, but I spent half the time over in Iran until the Shah was overthrown. And then in 1977 or 78, whenever that was, we had to be fully in the US. But my uncle lived in Southern California, in San Diego, right on the border, actually. And so I spent a lot of my childhood growing up on the border. And that's where I got the name Avocado, is I started growing avocado trees in 1978.
How old were you?
1978.
How old were you?
I was 8 years old.
Wow.
I was 8 years old. Yep. And that's where I get the name Avocado. I'm still doing it to this day. I mean, I still farm avocados in Hawaii, and it's still a major, major passion. I've now narrowed it down to the group of avocados that I think the world would love to hear more of and taste more of and have more of, which are the Guatemalan highland avocados, which are more the globe-shaped avocados, but very oily and delicious. And one avocado feeds the whole family. You know, they're huge.
Can you grow these in Northern California, or they need like really hot tropical?
No, there's microclimates in Northern California. You could grow them. They do well. You can grow them, like in San Diego, you can grow them. The typical variety that you see in San Diego is called either the Reed or the Cannonball avocado. And those are really great varieties, and they're big, and you can't quite get to the size you get in Hawaii, but you can get pretty good ones.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then what did you do once you became an avocado farmer at 8? Then what did you do after that?
Eventually, we moved to San Diego to be with my uncle. And so I spent a lot of my childhood, pretty much all my childhood in Southern California as a Southern California surfer, and got into the California way of life. And just, I lived that especially the health movement, and spent a lot of time between Ensenada and Santa Barbara. That was my range. Every break in those regions. Went to UC Santa Barbara. And then when I got to law school in San Diego, University of San Diego Law School, that's when I got into the whole like super health food movement. And basically I was so far into that I started not being able to show up to classes and get my law stuff done. And eventually I did graduate from law school. I never went and took the bar, but I did graduate and did really well my last semester there. I was really happy about that. I hardly was in class at all because I was out doing lectures on superfoods and raw foods and juices and all of that stuff. And then I've just been doing that ever since. Now, as time has evolved, as you know, it's more been about the health freedom movement now. And freedom in general, and freedom of choice in particular. And one thing I've been saying for many years, and people never could comprehend what I was saying because I grew up with medical doctors as my parents, medical communism always precedes actual communism. Wow. And I've been saying that, and I'm telling you, people would look at me googly-eyed 10 years ago, but now they're like, wait, what did you say? What did you mean by that?
Well, you know, when you look back on the Third Reich, the Nazis, it was their public health department that was pushing out the propaganda. They're the ones that are mandating things, right? So they're the ones that kept the fear appeal alive and well. And sure enough, here we are once again repeating history. So yeah, sadly, it really does make sense.
People believe that the Nazis are like different from the communists. They aren't. They're both socialists. They're opposames, actually, if you really want to be kind of clear about it. And it's all about the government's controlling everything. You don't get any say. The collective rules, not the individual.
That's right.
And over here in America, we're going to individual rights. And we know if we protect individual rights, we automatically protect the collective.
That's right. Exactly. That's very well said. And then did you go off also and get involved in becoming an engineer? Was that also part of your past at all?
Yes. No, I'm an engineer. I'm a mechanical and environmental engineer from UC Santa Barbara, which back in those days, you used to be able to get both degrees, which I did. And some years, maybe even right after I graduated, they stopped that. But so I have an environmental and mechanical engineering degree. I have a political science degree, which is really a philosophy degree, a law degree, and a master's in nutrition. But, none of that really is, correlates, too much to the real life experience. The real life experience is where it really happens. And it's nice to have a good education, but it's also nice to have real life experience.
That's what I kind of banked mine on, is real life. So did you know, if you went to UC Santa Barbara, you must have known the Sages, like Cindy Sage? They started the environmental program down there.
Oh, geez. Not right off the top of my head.
Well,
I was there from 88 till 93.
Oh, maybe it was later. Well, it could have been, they probably were there earlier, actually, because what they started was called the bioinitiativereport.org. Do you know about that?
No.
Okay, the Bioinitiative Report is like the standard bearer for peer-reviewed studies regarding radiofrequency injuries. And they update it every 5 years. It is the go-to website. They even have a nice chart laid out so you can just kind of see, like, oh, here's this frequency, these are the type of injuries, and these frequencies. I mean, it's brilliant.
Awesome.
And they update it, but they're the ones who started the environmental program in UC Santa Barbara.
What's the website again? Just so I've got that.
Bioinitiativereport.org.
Okay, you got it. Awesome.
Yeah.
See, you learn something new every day, and it's amazing how many people are doing good things out there in the world.
No, well, they moved here a few years ago. They're only like 15 minutes from me, so it's one of those happenstances. So so I just want to say to those who are listening, as my subscribers and viewers know, the last week and a half or so, though I did kind of cut off and do a soil ancestral, composting little retreat with no communication to the outside world that I'm still catching up to. I have been really kind of giving the lay of the land, more superficial, a little context as far as like the Nazis and NATO and World War II and what's really going on, and that Ukraine did have a CIA coup d'etat in 2014, and just because a lot of people just don't know this. And so I would love for us to do an even deeper dive. Like, I would love for us to talk about the Khazarian Mafia, who they really are, even if we get into the Jesuit order and the Black Pope and who the Pope really is. This is the stuff that just is not at the surface. So it's
coming up. It's coming up to the surface. More and more I hear about the Khazarian Mafia. I read Arthur Koestler's book. I have it right over here, actually. I should grab it. I'm just looking for it right now. I'm a avid reader, and about 20 years ago, I read Arthur. There it is right there. Let me grab it. Hold on.
Sure.
And this book, let's see here. This is a very interesting book about the 13th tribe. So this is about the Khazarians, which is a race of Ukrainians, essentially, that were they were running a mafia on the spice trade, as far as I can understand it, between what was traveling from China and India into Europe and into the Middle East. And they were kind of the go-betweens. And so it's like a mafia. It's kind of like, the traditional Italian mafia arose from the Roman Empire, where there was a group that was like, we're not going to do what the Romans say, and they were underneath the Roman Empire, running their own little operation, and that's really what gave rise to the Sicilian Mafia that we're all familiar with from the Godfather movies. Similar type of thing going on here in the Ukraine. Now, what happened is, and what Koestler talks about in this book, I've got to reread it. It's been many years.
What's the name of the book again?
It's called The 13th Tribe.
Gotcha.
And it's written by a Jewish man, so you can't say he's an anti-Semite. He's definitely a Jewish guy, and he talks about the conversion of a large section of the Khazars to Judaism, somewhere around 800 years ago. And if I remember correctly, I'm roughly right about that. And these people these became the Ashkenazi Jews.
Yeah.
And there was a mafia underneath them. And you see that mafia today in a lot of the Zionism that goes on. And when people say, oh, the Jews are behind it, it's not the Jews, it's the Khazarian Mafia. It's just like the same as the Catholics. It's like, oh, the Catholics are behind it. It's like, no, it's the Black Pope, and it's the Jesuits, and it's that crew. It's not every Catholic.
The Khazarian Mafia, the Khazarians are basically saying we're Jewish, but they're not their bloodline is not Jewish.
Correct.
They're just saying it. They're just stating it. It's like the cloak they're hiding under.
Right. And so, when somebody says like it's the Jews or it's the Catholics or whatever, all you have to do is look at what they did to Israel. I mean, they vaxxed the crap out of Israel. I mean, my God, how many people, like I'm talking to friends over there and they're like, they killed everybody off who's over 65. They just wiped them out, cleaned them out. I mean,
I can tell you that was one of the most shocking in the beginning. They really went for Israel. I mean, it was full throttle. And what's fascinating too, I want to hit upon this, is and I want you to notice, because I want this word to get out more. When I was mayor, when COVID hit, and we had our first stay-at-home orders, I was uncomfortable with us all being locked away, especially in the middle of the night. So I would every now and then spontaneously get up at 1 or 3 or 2 or 5 in the morning, just kind of drive around the county, drive around my city, see what was going on, and was really fast. And I don't know anybody else who's done this.
That's what a great move for a mayor. I love that about you. You're out of the box for sure.
Well, I'm just like, this is when you do shit. This is when shit happens, right? Just go home to the safety of your home. And sure enough, I start noticing between 3 and 5:30 in the morning, armies of utility trucks being deployed everywhere in our community. And they're rolling out the fiber optic cables, pole to pole to pole. And by 5:30, when there was a little bit of rush hour traffic, because most people were staying home, those trucks would disappear. And you see these big old, cables just hanging there, right? Big old, circle of cable. And this kept happening and happening. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then we're getting reports of schools where these HVAC, air conditioning trucks are coming in, but they're really putting 5G. And we're getting these reports. So finally, I reached out to Children's Health Defense, Daphna Talkover, who was in charge at that time of the 5G, EMF kind of section, fighting back. And I said, Daphna, I have to tell you something. They're deploying these fiber optic cables in the cloak of, under the cloak of night, and also into schools. And she's like, Reinette, it's happening across the whole entire country. Then I start speaking to people in Israel, Ireland. Once they came back out, I'm like, hey, question for you. When you came back out, were there antennas everywhere? Like 5? They're like, yeah, everywhere. I'm like, okay. As a former elected official, in order to pull something off like that at a global level, do you know how many years of preparation has to happen? Do you know how much hiring, training, ordering, right? I mean, just deploying,
planning,
financing, the planning.
Yeah.
And this spontaneously happened as soon as we were all shoved back into our homes. And I started wondering myself, why in the world would they do this under the cloak of night? Why would they do this? So, I mean, if it's no big deal, if they're not doing anything criminal, why not just expand the broadband from 8 in the morning to 5? It doesn't make, unless they're doing it all at once around the whole entire planet, and they don't want to alert the people that how the hell did this just turn on spontaneously?
That was an underlying theme of that time, wasn't it? That first COVID run, there was major activity going on with 5G, rollout of cable, internet, all kinds of interesting things on that front. And it was all by the cover of night. So that's interesting. It was going on even right there in that little, you're in Nevada City, right? In that region of California.
Everywhere. There was no community that wasn't having it happen. Everybody was seeing, like, you wake up in the morning and the fiber optics. I support fiber optics. I don't like what we connect to the fiber optics necessarily, but I mean, but you just see, it's down another, few poles, and you're like, I don't remember seeing the crews doing that. Well, because you were sleeping between 3 and 5:30 in the morning. I mean, that is a massive, massive deployment.
Yes, you're right. And it had to have been planned. And now we have the evidence, and we see the evidence that this whole thing has been planned for years and years. And it's what we suspected right at the beginning. I mean, as soon as they were like, oh, Trump's gonna, I think it was the Stafford Act or whatever, where he's gonna freeze the whole country for 2 weeks, and that whole 2 weeks to flatten the curve. I was like, oh, this is their next 9/11. They've been planning this. And of course, the evidence has now been compiled that they had been planning it for years and years, maybe even decades, maybe even longer than that. Yeah. And it's one of the things that they like to use to initiate. So you go from pandemic, which actually was a plandemic, right, and then you go into a famine, which is a planned famine, which is where we're at now. Right. And then the next phase is the war. And those three go together over and over and again historically. But interestingly, they're all, it's all fake now, right? Like, like, it's a fake war. There's no real reason why they should be fighting that war.
Absolutely
This is
not.
an ancient, like, border dispute where the czars always had the border at the river, right, where Kiev is, or Kiev, however you want to say
Right.
it.
Right.
And it's just, so they're playing it up
Yep.
as the CIA and the deep state and also the international actors like to do, to make it, oh, this one's a real war now, where's the Afghanistan conflict and the Syrian stuff and the bombing of Oman and all that other stuff. Oh, that was just like a little proxy thing where, Barack drone bomber,
Right.
dropped his 16,000 drones every year on those places, but those weren't real wars. It's so contrived and just ridiculous.
Well, and I do say, I know what we refer to the theater of war as where like the war is actually taking place, but I'm like, no, it really is theater. It is really shadow puppetry. And even now, I did a video I put out yesterday morning, and again, it took me a day and a half just to catch up to some of the news so I could be current. But I was just saying, I think it's really fascinating how we're now all facing Europe, EU, and Russia, Ukraine, all that, and we're looking at them while we have behind us the CCP, who has been infiltrating us for generations, and now they have CCP police stations popping up everywhere. We know we have almost 2 million CCP members who've been infiltrated in our society at every level. And I'm like, I find it really interesting that Biden, who is a CCP foot soldier, he will only do what they say. And, and we know CCP is part of the WEF and he's just it's one big club. But they're just playing us, right? So I'm thinking, well, why would CCP have Biden blow up the Nord Stream when, so the Russians are basically allies with Russia? Why would they? Well, unless they want to push us into a war, right? Down the cattle chute. And, you start seeing all this and it's like, okay, now I'm starting to get this. Really fascinating right now. So we have the Khazarians. They have been calling themselves Jews. That is not their bloodline. They are basically the Mafia. They have been for generations. They had controlled the spice trade routes, and then how are they connected to, if at all, the Jesuit order, the Pope? Do they work in tandem or do they compete?
It's both. It's like, at the very top, they work together, but they also fight each other.
Yeah.
And so they're always, always muscling in on their territory. But essentially the Khazarian Mafia, because of their history of the spice trade and their history of trade, they're running the banking system. So the Rothschilds are Khazarian Mafia.
Right.
And so it's usury. So just so everyone's clear about usury, this charging interest on money business is very dangerous. It only creates a debt system. And eventually it conflates to such an insane degree that we have the $31 trillion of debt, because the way money. So let's just get clear. This is very important. Super important. I mean, it took me years of study as a kid to get this and figure this out. And this is the future, and it's a very important future. How is money created? If I go in, let's say you're in a tribe and thousands of years ago, and you're on one side of the river and I'm on the other side, and I'm like, hey, you've got shells and stuff I'd like to have over there, and you're like, hey, you've got some cool fruits over there I'd like to have. If we construct a road and a bridge, we can then just go, hey, let's just use wampum or cacao beans to correlate to the value of that road and that bridge.
Right.
So the thing that's created creates the currency, the value that can be exchanged. And the more infrastructure, for example, the more phone lines, the more infrastructure, the more fiber optics, the more bridges, the more buildings, the more infrastructure is created, then we can create money out of nothing that correlates to that value. That's not how it's done today. Today, instead of creating money out of nothing that correlates to the value, we create the money out of nothing that correlates to a debt that then has to be paid with usury back to the bank.
It's insane.
It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. And see, this is the fundamental scam of central banking. And the reason why they're heading us into a famine and a war is because this $31 trillion crap and all this other nonsense can never be paid. It's never meant to be paid. They're then going to try to fold us into the next layer of digital slavery, which is the CBDC slave coins, where they can track every money. They can remove money out of your account. They can do anything. And the way we throw this all out is we get rid of their whole idea of usury and money creation. We listen to Article 2 of the Constitution, which says the Congress shall create the money, not the Federal Reserve Bank, which is a grouping of European bankers and Khazarian Mafia working together to basically saddle the United States and its people with debts that can never be paid. It's the whole thing cannot work. And that's again why we're heading in. That's why they want to run us into a war, and they'll keep running us into war after war after war forever if we don't sharpen up to this and smarten up to it.
Back in 2014, I started something called Our Nevada County, HOUR as in time, ournevadacounty.org. And it was a time bank. And it's through Our World Time Banking. They have an online software system where I actually have an online banking account. And I've been administrating it for years. And then when COVID hit, we just let it just sit there on the back burner. But I had a friend many years ago, a member of the time bank, saying, Reinette, we got to expand more and this and that. And I was like, nope, this is just a beta test. I just want to make sure it works. We're not ready. It's not bad enough. And we have these two lovely women who are stepping in to take it over, right? And so we're just kind of passing on the baton. But I'm like, okay, now we're ready. But what's so beautiful is that, I say to them, like, you guys, it's a paradigm shift, because we think that we cannot have an exchange or trade anything of value without a worthless paper or some zeros and ones on a computer. But it's up to us. We can make a currency give anything value. It's our choice. But we've been trained that it's got to be $1. And I said, but it can be kindness. So what this Our Nevada County, this time bank does, it's throughout 40 countries, tens of thousands of members. It's international currencies. Like, we're just keeping an accounting of kindness, of a kind exchange. And once we keep an accounting, is because of the accounting, it turns it into an international currency. Could you imagine if we made kindness the de facto currency of the world, what that would do?
It can be done.
Yes.
It can be done. And it will inevitably be done. I mean, my take on what's going on, the whole world situation, is we're at the end of the Kali Yuga. We've been in 5,000 years of darkness, and we're coming out of it. So now we're seeing the entire scam and everything that's running it, and the same playbook that they keep playing over and over again with pandemics and famines and wars and reset financial systems, create more slavery. So now we can say we're throwing the whole system out. Mm-hmm. And we can create currencies that compete against each other. So we could create a kindness cryptocurrency, for example, and make that compete against Bitcoin or anything else. And then through the competition of the currencies against each other, then we actually work out a system that feels right. And by the way, I like things being backed in gold, but it doesn't have to be backed in gold. It's backed by the assets of our whole civilization, which is the buildings, the roads, the bridges, everything else.
Right. Well, and why just have one asset?
Right.
I mean, that's the other thing, is why just have one? That's why put all your eggs into one basket.
Gold is one asset. So is silver. It's like, it's actually, this is just the real truth. And, I like getting people to the gold standard because at least we got them to that stage. But it's the real truth is that all this created stuff is all the assets.
That's right. That's right.
And we don't even, this whole thing that we need the banksters to print up money and then we borrow it from them, that has got to end. And it's got to end in this age. Yeah, in the next 100 years, that's gone. That's going away, because as the Kali Yuga ends, so does that banksterism and the usury and all the nonsense that goes with it.
Well, it's clear it's taken us into enslavement. It's very clear.
Yes.
And controlling and surveilling and so on. That's that. So just real quickly, I do want to get back to the Khazarians and the Jesuits and so on. Just as far as cryptocurrencies, what's your sense on that? Like, people who still have crypto, should they cash out? Should they just hold on and wait another 5-10 years? I mean, what's your take on that?
Okay, my take on it is that right now there's a divorce happening between the cryptocurrency market and the stock market. And you're seeing that because Bitcoin is still holding a price against a completely collapsing stock market, which nobody believes in anymore. We know from the GameStop scam that in the Redditors that the whole thing is contrived. The hedge funds can put a short on any business they want and just crush any stock. Right. If Redditors find out about it, then they can go, hey, let's put a long on that. Let's stop their short and crush their little scam, which wrecked 2 major hedge funds and almost collapsed their whole entire scam. Yeah. I mean, so obviously that's been gamed, for lack of a better term. But the crypto market is still new, so it's not as game. So what's beautiful about it is we're starting to see a separation now where the crypto market's going to go its own way. Right. And my recommendation is in the next month here, we could see another dip, which right before eclipse season, see the eclipse I think it was May 8th, the lunar eclipse crushed Luna, which was, by the way, that was all done on purpose. They're trying to crash the crypto market. The banksters are. They wanted it for a while so people would get used to digital currency. Now they got to get rid of the crypto market, the decentralized crypto market, and bring in their own centralized.
Yes, that's right.
So now they're trying to get rid of it, right? So it's like it did its role of getting people used to it. Now they want to get rid of it and they want to bring their thing in. But the cat's out of the bag. People realize like, hey, Bitcoin and these other runaway programs are out of the, like Monero are out of banksters can't control it. They can't. As much as they try to manipulate it, they still can't control it. Wherever they try to control it, like the CCP really likes to control Bitcoin, but guess who can own Bitcoin in China? Only the CCP legally. Everybody else, you can't have it, but they can.
Oh, wow.
Right. So they made it illegal. So if you look at who's the biggest owner in China of Bitcoin, it's the CCP.
Right.
It just shows you what's really going on right there. All it's about centralizing power.
Yeah.
At any rate, the crypto market is going to go up eventually once we go through the next lunar eclipse or the next solar eclipse, which is the end of October, beginning of November. I think right around November 8th is the big one, which, by the way, that's the evening of the election.
Oh, that's fascinating.
There's a massive solar eclipse over North America on the night of the election. November 8th. That's going to be wild. And that usually the eclipses is an energy flip. Now, when it comes to cryptocurrency, we could see a complete flip back to a bull market and a run up, which would, because Uranus is in retrograde, which controls a lot of digital currency. It takes until January for Uranus to be out of retrograde. Plus, we have the springtime and the forward motion. So I'd say about March is when we'll see a crypto bull market, according to that.
It's interesting because we have the election here in California and, Newsom, who's running against Dolly. They're the two runner-ups, we're really kind of fascinated that in 2018, Newsom, at the height of his popularity, got only 2.3 million votes out of 22 million voters.
Wow.
That was enough. That was the height of his popularity. And here now people really can't stand him. And a lot of people who voted for him in 18 did not vote for him this time. And yet he got almost twice as many votes. It was fascinating. And what's really
you know how they've locked in cheating and
100%. And we knew that. And I was running for governor and we knew that, but we had a different purpose for me running for governor, right? To network with the likes of individuals like yourself and to then continue, in a different direction, but use that to propel ourselves, to kind of boomerang ourselves forward. But interestingly enough, people also don't know is Newsom actually should be taken off the ballot. He has not fulfilled the requirements. You had to have 5 years per his own executive order, 5 years of tax returns, and he did not submit his tax returns this last round. So he actually does not qualify right now to be on the ballot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows what they're going to try to do. See, they pushed, Beijing Biden or pedo Hitler, or whatever you want to call the guy.
Yeah.
Just the most corrupt 50-year career criminal you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
They pushed him in there and they put attached Kamala to it because they knew they could get away with their massive cheating or fortifying the elections. And they put Kamala in there so that the devil, Beijing Biden, is better than the devil you don't know, Kamala Harris, who basically is an aborted baby parts saleswoman for China. That's what she.
No, I don't disagree with you. She's dark as dark can be, and I do find it interesting though. Either they've cloned her and she keeps malfunctioning because when you see her talk, she just chases her own tail. You're like, what the hell? And I'm like, okay, either that's not really Kamala. I don't know anymore. Can't tell. Or it's her and they're scripting her because I've seen her. We've seen her talk. We've seen her, be interviewed. We've seen her give presentations. She's actually not a stupid woman, but somebody is scripting her to sound like a freaking moron, and I'm like, why are they doing that psychologically? Is that for us to say, oh God, no, keep Biden there.
I think that's it. Okay. I think you're right about that.
It's like,
and that's a known tactic. It's a known strategic tactic that the CIA has used and many regimes have used throughout history. But see, eventually now we got a problem, which is Beijing Biden is malfunctioning because he's so dementiated out to the maximum. I mean, he's barely, able to even get through a sentence. Yeah. And so they're going to have to get him out of there, but they can't put Kamala in there. So I think they'll do a switch. I think they'll try to push gruesome Newsom in.
Yes,
right.
This is something I said a couple months ago. Also, I'm like, oh my God. I heard this one guy say, hey, it was only part of it. I'm like, oh, that's what they're going to do is shoo her away, give her some nice executive job, and we'll all be like, whoo, thank God. And then they'll we'll replace her with Newsom. So you'll have Biden and Newsom. And then when he goes away, like, oh, great. I don't think anyone's going to say, oh, great, we've got Newsom. But that is a play. And they did that with Gerald Ford. They did that with Nixon.
Good point. Excellent
So,
point.
we
Yes.
there's a precedent.
Yep.
We've done
There's
this
a precedent set. You're right.
Yeah. So it's like, oh boy, here they go. But we forget our history. So, okay, so I digress. So let's go back to the Khazarians. Khazarians. Now let's talk about the Jesuit order. When I actually was running for governor, I have to tell you, I had 3 separate people from around the country. Some guy that lived in the hill in Kentucky somewhere, or no, actually Tennessee, sent me this little thing. I think it's called the Silent Assassins. And it was about the Jesuit order, little tiny book, but I had 3 of them sent to me as soon as I was
At the same time, 3 of those books.
Yeah, from different corners. I was like, oh, I guess I need to read this book. And I did. And when I read the Jesuit order oath that they take, it is as dark can get. Now, I believe some former Jesuits we had, and even some current Jesuits, was Jerry Brown, I think it was a Jesuit.
Yes,
Isn't Newsom a Jesuit?
That's a good question. Probably by lineage, yes. I suspect, yes.
And then Anthony Fauci is
he reeks of the Jesuit order big time. Yeah,
it oozes out of his skin.
It oozes out. And there was I've got a book. I don't have it in this location, but I have a book. It's a big, thick book about the Jesuit order and their history, and especially in the United States. And it was written. I've got to think of that book. It's written by a very interesting writer. Big book too, and he goes through all the Jesuit connections throughout the history of America. It's a shocker. It really is. I mean, you're like, whoa.
The Titanic, right? The captain of the Titanic was a Jesuit.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Yeah, and he went down with his ship. He got the order, and he took the ship down to ensure the Federal Reserve, as you already know, could continue on and be put into place. And so, yeah, when you start seeing who the Jesuits were, you're just like, oh my Lord.
I grew up in San Diego, so we were very familiar with Father Serra, who founded the mission in San Diego. I grew up literally down the street from the Mission de Alcala, which is the first mission in California. The entire state of California is run by the Jesuit order and has been historically from the beginning of its founding as a state. I mean, it was all Jesuit missions. And, this is that thing about the light, right? So you think of Jesus as the light, and I'm really into Rudolf Steiner and his take on Jesus. And the reason why I got into Jesus is because of people I know, and many and dozens of people who said to me at the bottom of the pit of despair that Jesus came to them and saved them.
Wow.
That's how I got into it. It wasn't because I was like, oh, let's read the Bible or something like that. No, it's from direct experiences with many different people from many different walks of life who told me that story. And I was like, wow, they don't know each other. They could not have known each other.
And were they all Christians?
No. These are people who were not, they were basically agnostic.
Wow.
I wouldn't say they were necessarily atheistic, although some of them were.
Wow.
And called out with in the pit of drug addiction, in the pit of alcoholism, in the pit of total destruction of their, life or their relationship or something, and called on Jesus for help and depression, and Jesus came to them and saved them, or supported them or something.
Wow.
And so I've heard that story so much over the years that I was like, this is not, there's something going on here. And that's how I got into that. So if, let's just think of Jesus as like a light bearer, an ascended master on the earth. Of course, the darkness is going to wrap itself right around that and say, oh, no, that's us. We're with that guy. That's how I look at it. And so when you think of like Jesus, you're going to think of, definitely the darkest of the dark and the most pit of despair and the most horrendous stuff is going to be wrapping itself around Jesus, saying that they're actually the representative of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so when I see the Jesuits and what they're up to, I go, yep, okay, I see it. I get it.
Yeah. Well, see, this is what's really important. This is why my Substack is called Reinette Senum's Foghorn Express Substack.com, is because I'm really trying to get us through the fog. So we can get to the other side and see more clearly, because we've been living in a fog for generations. And I have to tell you something, Avo, and I love calling you Avo because you're not a David, you're not an Avocado, you're Avo.
Most people call me Avo. So
yeah, I know. I asked, is it Avo? And I'm like, because you look like an Avo to me. But it's really, the thing is, as soon as you see the patterns, right? As soon as you are aware of the Jesuit order, the Khazarian Mafia, NATO, the Nazis, the CCP. As soon as you become aware of it, you see it. It's like the cloak's been pulled down, the wool's, off your eyes. And that's what I'm trying to get us to, because once that happens, you can't be so easily played.
That's it. That's exactly right. And these things need to be issues that people see in front of them, that are on the ballots, that are known. Like, hey, you can't vote for Gruesome Newsom because he's got CCP connections,
Oh, oh,
direct
oh,
Jesuit
oh,
CCP
oh,
connections.
yeah, yeah,
And he's helping to smuggle billions, if not trillions of dollars out of California into China. That's all that needs to be right there for everybody to see. So we need a media that's no longer like, oh, no, don't look here. Oh, don't look at that. Oh, no, you're a racist or a homophobe or this or whatever their thing is. Don't look here. It's all just a smokescreen to keep you away from the truth of who these people are really working for. And what's beautiful, it's all coming down now. It's all coming down, and we're all banding together from all walks of life, all ideals, right? From Islam to Catholicism to the Hinduism and to every angle of this. We're all coming together and going, oh, it's corruption at the top.
Oh, it
in
is.
all the religions.
And I'm telling you, people I talk to all the time, and I'm always surprised by who I see respond to me. But I'm like, and I've been questioning reality since I was a child, to be honest, because I was adopted, and I was like, who am I? So I was always like, searching for more. I'm just always ask for the truth. I just want the truth. I don't care what it is. I don't care how dark it is. I just want the truth, and I'll take it from there. And so I've been saying to people, I'm really, really questioning everything in my reality, our history, assumptions, blah, blah, blah. And almost everyone I talk to, like, I know, so am I. I'm just questioning everything. I'm like, fascinating. We seem to have, reached a tipping point where at the very least, people are assuming, a lot of people are assuming what they're hearing and being told is not true. Thank God.
A big change, and especially in America. I can see the changes happening in Canada, but Canada's behind because they're still massively brainwashed by TV. They still believe what's on the TV, whereas Americans don't. Americans don't believe anything that's on TV. Whereas you compare that to the Richard Nixon days, where Nixon said the American people will not believe anything unless they see it on TV. We're out of that. That's over. It's like 7% of the population believes what they see on TV, which is a collapse. Yeah. And it's causing them to freak out, hence the social media control, hence the big changes in we've got to censor everybody now. We can't have the truth out. I mean, everyone would find out how corrupt we are. We got to stop it.
We can't let them think for themselves.
That would be terrible.
Were you the one that put onto your Telegram the Alan Watt video?
Yes.
Oh,
Alan Watt was such a gem for humankind.
Was that powerful when he talked about when the prime minister basically legally required every household in England to have a television set. They brought in used television sets from America. And he was saying how always out in the square every day on the weekends, there was always community and discussion, debate. It's just like the place was filled with this conversation. And the day that those television sets landed in everyone's living room, they went back out to the square and it was empty. Wow.
It changed within weeks, he said. Within
like a week or two.
A system that had been in place, a community system that had been in place for hundreds of years, wiped out by television within weeks.
Yeah. And then at that point in time is the beginning and the end. We were completely controlled. This is what you're going to think. This is what's happening. Yeah. Okay. So the Khazarian Mafia, they're not what or who we think they are. They've been calling themselves, Jews, though they don't have the bloodline. Now we have the Jesuit order. And to explain to people, the Jesuit order is basically the Pope's version of the CIA, right?
Well said, right. and there's a hit squad, P2, the hit squad right, which is like, CIA has their hitmen, right? Yeah. That's correct. And so, yes. And so they've been running a gambit, which is essentially they worship Lucifer.
Yeah.
In their consciousness, they're worshiping the fallen angel, Lucifer.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting distinction that I want to bring in here that Rudolf Steiner brings in, which is a very important, in my opinion. Rudolf Steiner says there's actually two forms of evil, not just one. So Lucifer is like giving your power away, false light, worshiping the false idols, worshiping the false light. That's very Luciferian deception. And so like giving your power away to doctors, like doctors know I don't know anything. I'm giving my power away. That's very Luciferian. Wow. But Steiner brings up another form of evil that he says is even deeper and more intractable as part of this earth, which is the Ahrimanic force, which is forces of algorithms and materialism, materialistic explanations for everything. The idea that you're just a physical body, that you descended from apes by beating each other over the head with bones and all that other crap that we were taught. That is so bad and is so deeply ingrained. I mean, you talk to people about Darwinism, they believe it. They have bought it all the way. And it's like, whoa, you never looked at the evidence opposing. You never like what? Yeah. and that Darwinism, that's, survival of the fittest. It's like, first of all, let's just analyze survival of the fittest. Who survives? The fittest. Okay, who are they? Well, they're the ones who survive. Okay, so it's a tautology. It can be made to explain anything. You can take any series data and say, oh, it's survival of the fittest. It's like, well, it's not predictive. It's just your explanation after the fact is always who survives, the fittest. Who are they? The ones who survived. It just goes around in a circle. This is the nonsense that we've been taught. And the Ahrimanic deception, Steiner says, in this century comes to a head. So that you see this with this Yuval Noah Harari, Klaus Anal Schwab's little pet demon, who's basically saying you're just an algorithm, you're a hackable animal. That's direct quote. Rudolf Steiner said, watch for that. Direct quote.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's no doubt. It's really interesting. We go back to that questioning your reality, coming from apes, even fossil fuels, right?
There's no fossils involved.
It's probably abiotic oil. I mean, I used to believe in peak oil years ago. It's got me into really my environmentalism. And now I'm going, been totally duped. They got to create that scarcity. Oh, it's fossil fuels. Now we're finding out there's actually no complete dinosaur bones anywhere. In fact, they're just models of what a dinosaur would look like. And you're like, wait, what a sec. And then you go on to hear about Tataria and the mud floods. And you're like, and the world fairs. You're like, oh my God.
I've been deep in the San Diego World's Fair this week. I've been looking at images of Balboa Park in San Diego, and like, okay, what did that look like in 1915, and who actually constructed those? Like that, there's some insane architecture in San Diego in 1915 where you're just like, what?
Everywhere. Okay, so for those who are like, wait, what in the world are they talking about? There's a history, a much more modern history, very recent history, I should say, that looks like not that long ago, 150 years ago or so, where there's massive mud floods. Many stories were just absolutely covered up. And we had these world fairs, different Paris, St. Louis, San Diego, San Francisco, where they had these elaborate, gorgeous, huge, intricate architecture, and it was all lit up by tens of thousands of light bulbs. And before we even had light, and there's no wires, and they would have these incredible world fairs with these extraordinary buildings that really looked like the buildings, architecture like cathedrals, were actually just collecting electricity, right? They're like power generators, and as soon as the world fairs were over, they raised them. And but the question is, like, who built those? Like we were in carts and buggies, in horses. Who built those? And like, we just built that in 2 years. And then you raise the whole thing. And what's shocking is when you start to go down that wormhole, it's buildings after buildings after cities of just, it was otherworldly.
They deconstructed it. And so this brings up another one, the Khazarian Mafia, the Jesuits. Here's another big one, the Freemasons.
Wait, they're all like, they must all be cousins.
Well, the Freemasons, you can be like in the Vatican and be a Freemason. You could be a president and be a Freemason. You could be in the Khazarian Mafia and be a Freemason. The Freemasons connect them all together. And the Freemasons, right, Masonry, they were, I'm sure, the coordinators of deconstructing the old world and then building these buildings that we have today, which just look like boxes and crap.
Well, also what I was reading into and seeing, all those wormholes, is that when we kept having these great fires of Boston, great fires of Seattle, the great fire of San Francisco, what was happening is that they were actually using these as excuses to burn the last of the museums with the art, the libraries with the books and the maps. They were trying to eradicate everything of Tataria and the old world and the wisdom we really had. And they literally took us into these indoctrination camps known as public education. And it made sure that we forgot that history completely. And every now and then you will actually have books cropped up. In fact, Cliff High, who I love, I'm sure you probably know Cliff High, he goes out and buys old encyclopedias because he's like, these encyclopedias were never meant for the common man. The only thing you do is you'd see the end of the book and the edge of the book, and that'd be it. And yet when you open it up and you read it, right, it's like, wait a second, what did you guys just say?
Totally different education than what we're getting today. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I'm an avid reader and that I pursue very exotic books, from things like the 13th Tribe. I've always been like that. I mean, I've had this book for easily 20 years. Let me just see when I got this. So this was Geez, this was published originally in 1976. So I got this maybe in the late 80s or early 90s. That's how long I've had just that book in my, you know what I mean? So I've got all kinds of interesting old encyclopedias, by the way, and old dictionaries right down here. The old world books from the 70s. My parents got those for us. I kept them all. And I do keep all. I have a book by Ulysses S. Grant that was written in the 1860s.
Mm-hmm.
You look at it and you're like, what's this?
Right. Well,
what's going on here?
I think it's interesting because over the years, I have seen a movement to encourage people to get rid of their books. They collect mites. They collect dust. Just take your own little favorite books and keep. And I'm like, no, and no again. Hold on to every book you have, and you have to put them in a box in the garage. You don't want to go digital. They want us to go digital so they completely control history up to like yesterday. They'll
it's 1984 style, isn't it?
Oh,
it's so 1984.
So we have all these cousins. We've got the Freemason. Oh, by the way, Masonic Lodge in Nevada City is number 13 in the country. Just saying. So yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, and they don't like me, by the way. So we have the Masonic Lodge, we have the Khazarians, we have the Jesuit order, they're all practically cousins, and they're all struggling for power. And we have the Pope, and the Pope's basically the Jesuit order. For him is equivalent to his own version of the CIA, but that is because he wants to be the almighty power, correct? So he wants to make sure no religion, no spirituality happens whatsoever unless it's him, which is Satanism. And in fact, didn't they just come up with a one world government just the other day?
Your one world religion, which is Chrislam, which is the Pope's basically trying to say, the Pope's trying to maneuver in and be like, okay, I'm going to take over Islam. And then Islam's trying to maneuver in saying, hey, we want Catholicism. So they've now kind of agreed to like meld with each other and create Chrislam.
And they're all Satanists. I mean, I'm not even a Christian. I'm like, this is Satanism. So what?
It's clear to see, isn't it? And you can see their agenda is very specifically like I was watching a thing last night. A friend sent to me about this climate. They're having a religious climate conference, and they're going through the 10 commandments, and they're saying the 10 commandments on climate. And so you could see that they're clearly trying to overturn each one of the 10 commandments and replace it with a fake one.
Oh my God.
I mean, it goes to that level. So if you don't believe in the 10 commandments or whatever, I'm telling you, they do, and they want to overturn it, and they do everything they can to overturn it all the time.
Mm-hmm. It's really staggering. It's staggering what they're doing, but I feel like it's all getting faster and faster and faster. And I think it is, right? Because people are waking up. So one of the things we have to understand is that there has been, we're talking thousands of years. This is thousands of years in the making. It didn't just spring up out of nowhere.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. And we have been conditioned for thousands of years. And so, it's, and I think what we're realizing is that we are food for these animals. These things are monsters.
I call them the predator class. I don't call them elites or anything. They're they look at us as prey. They're a predator class.
I had a hit about a few months ago, and it was really a dark hit, I have to say, but it was this. I was looking at my partner's cats and dogs. They have a lovely life, beautiful. They're so cared for and loved. And I'm sure these cats and dogs think every cat and dog around the world has this kind of life, right? But they don't know that in China and Vietnam, there's cat markets in dog meat markets. They don't know that. And I turned to my partner Susan one day. I said, I realize we're like our cats and dogs. We don't think there's a meat market for us, but there is. And there has been for generations. And those Khazarians, those Jesuits, right? Those evil Catholics, not all Catholics, right? The popes.
It's the group running on each one of these things, right? Like the Khazarian Mafia isn't every Jew in the world. It's a very small 0.01% of the overall group. Same with the Catholics, the Jesuits are just a small point. The Freemasons are very, very small trade organization, but they have very strong power.
Yes, they do. Well, they got all the control. They're the ultimate middleman. I mean, they've gotten into everything. They're the middleman in everything: our food, our education, our religion. I mean, media. I mean, they're the middleman. And so I've been saying to people, it's up to us to extricate them from our lives and get rid of the middleman. And you had hit upon it really earlier on when you're talking about Reddit and how they're countering, Wall Street moves, right? Like they were seeing what's going on and they went out there. So, and I try to say to people, like, look at you guys, we're in a race against time. those in power know what we're up against. And we have to understand that the numbers, are in our favor. We've got the numbers. You have like the people on Reddit doing what they're doing. You're doing what you're doing. I'm doing what I'm doing. I mean, we're all doing our thing. It's like, and then there's not millions, there's billions of us. And they know that we outnumber them. So once we actually realize that we've got the numbers, we've got the power, we've just got to say, you know what? I see you, Mr. Middleman. I now know your history. I know how you got here. I know how we all got here. And I'm actually not participating in that scenario. I'm going to go over here and just take the wind out of your sail, and poof, they will go away. But we have to stop participating.
That's it directly. And this is what I love about the cryptocurrency world, especially the encrypted, decentralized world like Monero. It's like, once you can take your value and put it into something like Monero, that the government, the control freaks, they're control freaks.
Yes.
These people are known control freaks. They can't control it. They can't see it. They don't know what's going on. As soon as you've got that, you've got something that's way crazier than a Swiss bank account that they can never crack ever. And that is their ultimate fear. Right? Because these people want control. They want to control everything. And just as a wake-up call, folks, these people are not like you. They want to control everything.
Yep.
They're control freaks. They're maniacs. And that's why they want, we got to have more legislation. We got to have more of this. Because they want to control everything. It's a disturbance in the being. It's a soul disturbance.
Yeah.
And this is getting exposed. So as soon as you can have a cryptocurrency ecosystem like Monero and even Bitcoin, or even stuff that's even more transparent like that, or more easier for the government to see into it, even then their whole system is going to eventually come apart when you can have a competing cryptocurrency market, because ultimately they can't control it. They can't get to centralized, it's our digital currency and everything else is illegal. They're not going to be able to pull that off anymore. It's impossible, because the internet is peer-to-peer. They can't control my phone to go into somebody else's phone. They don't know what's going on. No,
they don't. And it's all about decentralizing. That's what I've been saying. Like, you got to see the writing on the wall. I mean, we've been blowing up food processing and, plants and so on, distribution centers. So it's like, as you said, the playbook next is to starve us out. So I've been saying to people, it's not going to be forever, but you've got to be able to bridge the gap from this point to, I don't know, next spring, next summer. I don't know.
2 years, probably.
Maybe 3. We're not coming right out of it, but you have got to be able to handle being disconnected from the rest of the world and systems failing. And now that we've got the whole Ukrainian Nord Stream 1 and 2, and we've just opened ourselves up for retaliation. I mean, there's no way Putin is not going to retaliate. So I just say to people, like, you just have to expect the unexpected and be ready for interruptions and have some plan Bs in place.
Let's talk about the Putin and Zelensky. Now, right off the top of your head, you can see that Zelensky is a total maniac. I mean, he's calling for a preemptive nuclear strike, which we should get into this too, by the way. I spent years with internet sleuths on nuclear weapons. So the one bomb destroys one city story is a fraud. It's a Cold War hoax, just so everyone knows.
Okay, so let's talk about...
Let's get into that a little bit, because we went through every supposed detonation of every nuclear weapon that's ever been filmed. They're all composites. They all show evidence of photoshopping. They've been composited. They've been mixed together. So they're not authentic. So that's important to know. So this one bomb destroys one city, or the 100 megaton or whatever the story is a fraud. It's a Cold War hoax. Now, that doesn't mean that nuclear weapons don't exist. They definitely do, and they've been used. Like, for example, you can ask anybody who lives in Serbia during the Bosnian War. The Clintons were using depleted uranium weapons and contaminated enormous areas and farmland of Serbia, even to today. Those weapons exist. I've seen people who had radiation disease from basically, they were the ones loading radioactive munitions onto planes, and just being around it's radioactive. So that's real. Now, the real danger, in my opinion, is dirty nuclear weapons, where you have a really powerful explosive, like, when you saw that explosion was it in Lebanon? It was a couple years ago. Remember that explosion happened? Imagine an explosion like that and dirty nuclear debris being spread everywhere.
Mhm.
That's real. Now that this 10,000 year half-life nonsense or 100,000 year half-life nonsense, also nonsense. This stuff degrades much more quickly than that, but it can be there for decades, maybe even 100 years, maybe longer, but it's not 10,000 years or 100,000 years. That's another hoax.
Wow. Wow.
So that's important to know, that all of those little nuances. So this is the reason why they're talking about a tactical nuclear war, because that's in the cards for them, in the sense that they know if they use a tactical nuclear weapon, which is going to spray dirty nuclear debris everywhere, that they can make a place uninhabitable for a while, and then they can move in when they're ready to move in years later, decades later.
So did you see that Pelosi, they just invested a bunch of money in Amgen for
Yes.
radioactive pills?
Yes, and we should just quickly talk about that. It's very important to protect yourself with iodine first. That's very important. Things like chaga mushroom, which they're basically able to take high frequency radiation and bring it to lower frequency radiation, which is more your body can accommodate it better. Those types of things will become very, very important in the future. So whatever you can do to protect yourself. One of the things that I do, and I'll just show you this right here. I can turn this on. I can be breathing in deuterium depleted Brown's gas. Now what that is it's a deuterium free or tritium free hydrogen. Now, one of the biggest problems of nuclear material is that it gets hydrogen and converts it to deuterium. It adds an extra neutron, or to tritium, 2 extra neutrons, which is radioactive, and it ages you. And so using Brown's gas, which I breathe in, this is a friend of mine who makes these devices, Brown's gas devices, you can protect yourself from radioactivity. Oh, you know what? I'm on, I've got another call I've got to jump on. Oh my God.
Oh, and it was just getting good.
It was just getting good. Maybe we'll do, this will be part 1 and be part 2. And this is my friend who's a filmmaker who really wants to interview me. And so that's coming up here.
Let's do a part 2 if you don't mind, Avo.
I would love to. I think we're just getting into the juice of it. So this is like the commercial for part 2.
This is part 2. So we'll do part 2 sometime like next week or so. Avo, I love who you are. You're the best part of the pandemic to me, the pandemic, and just have a great interview. And we'll catch you next week on the other side, and we'll get even to more of the solutions.
Okay. Same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks so much, Reinette. Love you tons. Have the best day ever.
You take care. And thank you everyone for checking in. That was David Avocado Wolfe. Goodbye, everyone, for now. See you next time. Bye.
Cheers.
All right.